Welcome back, Giant Swordfish. You want to say your disclaimer? Oh, alright. So Ash and Dane not here today. But I'm joined again with, in a previous episode, I'm joined with Mansor, Mandala, and Moses. Moses, you can say your disclaimer now. Go on.
These views are mine and not those of the BBC. Thank you.
There we go. There we go. So we're just gonna same old, just talk and just entertain ya on whatever you're listening to us on commute or whatever. So let's get started. Do you just want to get straight started, or do you want to have a little catch up?
I think we should get started because it's like we kind of started over dinner, innit? And then
can I just say something though before we start? Because the last podcast we spoke about Shamima Begum. Today there was an interesting story that one of the guys got his citizenship revoked. I just thought it was quite interesting that when we last spoke, we spoke about that, and today that topic came up again. I thought it was a bit of a poetry there.
So wait,
I can't remember what episode that was. I think the name of it was Terror is Terror though. So yeah, control F that.
It was just interesting. I thought it was quite an interesting observation.
So somebody else has had their citizenship revoked.
Yeah.
What was the grounds?
He's got Canadian citizenship as well. You know that guy who's meant to have Asperger's?
Yes.
Yeah. It was just interesting that we're talking now, and the last time we spoke, we were talking about that. I might bring it up.
I haven't seen that story.
Yeah. It's big.
But wait, what did he do? What's his crime?
He went to Syria.
Oh, okay.
I don't know his name, but
maybe the youth will think about it.
We can start now. I just thought I'd bring that in.
What we are talking about, though, I'm just saying in terms of what happened this week as well, is especially that is pretty local to us because we're South London. And Morley's is being in touch with this. Chicken boxes are being replaced with black boxes that say #knife crime. And with stories and tales of people that have been affected by knife crime. And it's basically a way to try and basically stop it, essentially. Now, the debate here is, guys, is it racist how they targeted this? Yay, nay?
Yes. That's my opinion.
Go for it.
I don't even know where to begin with this one because I don't want to misquote statistics, but black people are a very small percentage.
Sense.
What percentage do we make up the UK? Is it like 5 or it's something really small? And then also, what percentage of knife crime is actually that is black people responsible for? We are not the majority. Although it may be painted.
Good. Okay.
Go on. I think you should. Yeah. Let me formulate my thoughts, and I'm handing it over to Mandala because, this one is a lot.
Okay. In my opinion, this whole it's a targeted campaign that is very ignorant, and it's clear evidence that there's not enough members of the ethnic communities in the places of power, because if they were, then actually before this would have been pushed forward to say this is a good idea, there would have been a level of conversation anyway, like a clear conversation to say, look, this is prejudice at the highest level. Targeting chicken shops is peddling racial stereotypes of black people and people of like black people in particular, like with chicken, and I was saying earlier that with this movement, if they think it's acceptable to put it on on chicken boxes, then they might as well go to every fresh fruit and wholesaler and stick the same stickers on watermelons, because it's the same idea. Like when you're heading towards these kind of things, it's because there's an idea that black people like this thing, and even though they haven't.
But the question is,
even though they haven't openly said it, the issue that's there is the fact that they have directed. Like they're saying that we always have black people in the media. Do you know what I mean? Being painted to be the main people that are committing these crimes.
But this is the question I'm saying. I'm just playing devil advocate here in terms of what the argument against would say. Is are we not kind of then stereotyping ourselves, saying that we go to chicken shops, so they're targeting us? Are we not doing that? Like, cause maybe they're just targeting. Is it to say that? It's
so why are they targeting chicken shops?
No, I'm saying no, but I'm saying no. This is what I'm saying. Is it us? Are we also like perpetuating the stereotype, saying that we go to chicken shops, so they're coming at us for it?
I'm not.
No,
I'm not with it at all.
no.
I'm
Okay.
Oh, you finished. Okay.
In my opinion, it's not even just necessarily black girls or but like it's black kids in general, ethnic minorities in general, because there's a higher proportion of chicken shops. We're not talking about KFC where you can find that from the West End all the way to Southeast London. Do you know what I mean? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Morley's, which is spread out throughout the areas that are more rich in what you call it in ethnic minorities.
So when you think of when you say the target audience is, because essentially the target audience for the knife crime is teenagers, no?
Yeah, teenagers.
Yeah. So where would you say that they would be to target them with that kind of marketing? That's what I'm saying. Where
You
would
know
you
where
say
I
that
would have put it? At a bus stop.
Yes.
They have that. Do they have
Yeah.
that as well?
Maybe they do.
So
you know.
today I saw one at the bus stop.
Maybe they
which is
do.
fair. I would have put it on a Boris bike because actually I have seen from young kids all the way to middle class white men on a Boris bike. So I would have put it on a Boris bike. I think targeting chicken shops is literally peddling a racial stereotype that is unacceptable. And the thing is, it's quite frustrating for me. I think, in my opinion, the worst person in this time of uncertainty is being a teenage black boy. If you're not being stopped, and searched by the police because you meet a certain look criteria, age criteria, and definitely racial criteria, you know, if you're not being bothered by the police, you're now being warned about knife violence and its effects at your local chicken shop. I think it's unacceptable.
Can't just get 4 wings and chips in peace.
Do you know what I mean?
Mansor, what you got on this? Because you've been quite quiet on this.
Yeah, so do you know what? I hold quite a nuanced view on this. I think that I actually don't have a problem with that message being put in chicken shops. What I have a problem with is that message being put, let's say, more exclusively just in chicken shops. I also have a problem with the idea that necessarily these teenagers only operate in chicken shops. I don't have a problem with the whole chicken shop thing per se. I think it's not necessarily a bad idea. I think you have to put it in several different places and also have a wider approach. It has to be part of a wider approach. If you do that, I believe you can undermine the argument that it is racist or ageist XYZ. But when you put it exclusively in one space, then we get into a controversial zone. Do you see what I'm saying?
I think it's a bad idea to go.
See, for me, I personally don't.
It's a waste of finance.
Even though it's in the chicken shop, for me personally, I don't see how it's actually going to show any kind of benefit in terms of preventing people carrying knives, though, regardless. Because when we think about it, as a teenager, if you get a box of chicken, whatever, the first thing you do is literally just, look at the box, you just eat it and chuck it away. Yeah. And if I'm carrying a knife for whatever reason, why is that going to make me stop carrying a knife? I think there's a bigger issue than putting awareness, because they know they're carrying knives, they know what they're doing with the knives, they know what they have the knives. You telling me someone's story about the knife isn't doing nothing. Think about if I'm not going to spend all of a sudden eat my chicken and say, I better throw this knife away in the bin now too, because I'm still in danger or whatever reason why I'm carrying a knife.
But that's a different point. That you're talking now about the effectiveness.
Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. So what's the point of even targeting that?
Well, listen, I think you can put the message out there, and if you put it around multiple spaces where multiple different types of people operate socio-demographically, that's not a bad thing. I don't necessarily think.
But would you say?
But
okay,
the
so
effectiveness of it is a different matter.
But what they? Okay, would you say? Would you think it would be there'll be a waste of funding if they were to put it on Starbucks cups?
You know, it could.
Would you think it was pointless
It
if
could,
they put it on Starbucks
it could
cups?
potentially be a waste of funding, but you have to see the efficacy of it to then say it's a waste of funding. Right now, because it's just being initiated, you don't know. We can presume that it will be, because I agree with you. If the man them are going out and just yamming on chicken, they're not going to really be looking at that, right?
Do you think they're good? Yeah.
I agree with it, and I presume it will be a waste of money. But I don't have a problem, objectively speaking, with that message being put around anywhere. I'm not saying it will be effective. I just don't have a problem if you
I
put it in
agree.
a
I think
nightclub.
a bus.
Yeah, a
like,
nightclub.
you know
a
those
bus.
big bus
Hang
adverts.
on. We're not talking about a bus, though, guys.
No, but you could put
We're
it at a
talking about
night.
chicken shop.
Yeah, you could talk. No, but if you
We're
put
talking
it in
about-
multiple spaces, then I don't have a problem with it being in a chicken shop. Do you see
you're
what I'm saying?
I have a problem with it being a chicken shop, full stop. Because I mean, we're in 2019 and we're in London at that. So I do agree with you in the sense, okay, well, if it's in multiple places, cool. But I just think sometimes we have to just really question things like, we're in 2019, we know what the world has been through racially. I just feel like it's like, compare it to like the Gucci campaign or the H&M things. I'm like, for a decision to get from idea to actually boxes with these knife-free things, when you work with brands, you realize it's not an overnight thing, you know. It's like they have to come up with the idea, they have to sell it to the shareholders, they have to consult with people. So I'm like, this isn't just a quick snap decision.
No, but
so my opinion on it is like, given that, at no point did nobody stop to think, is this racially insensitive?
I
But
get
then,
you.
but then this is,
I
this-
agree with
I
that.
agree with that 100%. And this is
too.
the reason why I have said it is evident at this point that there is not enough representation in these places of power, in the decision-making rooms, because if there was, then we wouldn't make such a stupidly and ignorant, like, we wouldn't make such an
No, but
ignorant
I
decision.
100% get that fully. Like, in terms of like, it does seem like, oh, why are you targeting people that go, you know what a chicken shop is, you know? Yeah. But then again, when you think about it, when you're a teenager and whatever, and you're maybe their defense could possibly be, we're targeting teenagers, because as a teenager, say if you finish school and you have £3 on you, it's the chicken shops you go to for food. You don't go to Pret a Manger. You don't go to Starbucks. You don't go to these places. Like, you don't. These, like, you know
Depending
what I mean?
on,
Like,
depending on your geographical positioning.
no, but what I'm saying for our geographical positioning,
Can I question,
Would we not
was
go
it
to
just
Morley's?
Morley's? Or was it various chicken
They
It
shops?
was
haven't said
Morley's
that.
and
It's-
Chicken Cottage,
yeah.
I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the point...
And where are
favourites.
those? Where are those?
Okay,
Where are
Paris
those?
is good though.
where-
Not a favourite
Don't
chicken
touch
shop.
on our
No,
favourites.
shout out the favourites.
No, but then you have to
Not
ask
Nando's.
yourself, where is
No,
the
not
majority?
Nando's.
Where's the majority of these
No,
chicken
I'm
shops?
saying teenagers though.
I'm sorry.
In
I'm not-
diverse
I refuse. No,
localities.
sorry. I refuse. I totally refuse to negotiate on behalf of white people who are making decisions that are very clearly discriminatory towards our black children. I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that, because if we went into KFC, if we said, "Oh, we're just touching on all kinds of chicken brands and whatever," you're touching on chicken brands that are based in certain areas where the demographic will predominantly be black children, brown children, as in Asians, Hispanic, Latino. It's not acceptable, because actually, it's not even teenagers that are committing the highest number of knife crimes. It's actually adults. Do you get what I'm saying? So if we're saying that we're targeting teenagers, then perhaps we need to be going into schools and sixth forms. That's where you're going to find them.
But do you think they're overtly doing it?
I said it's ignorance.
No,
You
they
asked
be
the
ra-
question.
yeah.
Your question was, is it racist? I don't think it is. I don't think, bless those Tories, I don't think they were sitting there thinking, yeah, let's target
bless them.
these.
God bless
You know, I think
God
it
bless
was literally a situation where they were like, this makes sense. And they just didn't think this is racially insensitive. And the issues that we're faced with, as I said to you guys before, is proof of like intersectional discrimination. It's negotiating an ideology rather than what is actually happening in real life. Because if you think about it, there's a little bit of age that comes into it. Do you know what I mean? There's a little bit of racial stereotype that comes into it. And in total, like when you're looking at all these different factors that come together, do you know what I mean? There's only one individual who is the most targeted out of all of this, and it would be the black teen. I was reading the Independent. I just want to tell you guys what I'd seen. The graphs and charts claiming that knife crime was at an all-time high, when actually in the capital here in London, it's gone down by 8%. Those facts can be found on the gov.co.uk's statistics and various other statistics sites. There were 400 rapes that were involving knives. There were 4,277 injuries and 21 youths killed. The page was filled with images of like black boys being arrested, images of the 21 killed, God rest their souls. And actually what this created is an idea that this is only a black problem, but when I was reading into some of these statistics, it began to show that some of these knife crimes were committed by white children. Some of them didn't actually make it to a conviction, surprise, surprise. And some of them were only just an arrest with a warning. So therefore, there's no statistical evidence that shows that there was anything that was taken further for some of these black kids. Whereas the UK judicial system, there's more black people on number in prison than anyone else, and yet we only make 10% of the population in total.
3.5, we just clarified.
Oh, 3.5
of the UK.
No, but then who's to say that a white kid isn't that grows up in South London isn't going to a chicken shop?
Yeah, and I think
because they're living. What they just? What
and
they
that's
just
the
actually
reason why I
target-
said it's
no, what they-
intersectional.
But
It's
the
intersectional.
point
So
is-
that white kid is going to go there, but he's been targeted, and I said it's an age thing. But it is also we cannot forget that when we're talking about out of all the people who are affected, I said it's intersectional discrimination. So we're talking about age, we're talking about gender, and we're talking about race. Do you get what I'm saying? And I said the most disenfranchised out of all of these people would be the black boy, and that's my issue.
The teenage black boy, yeah.
I agree with you. I just looking objectively, these things are all rooted in some sort of socio-political context. But if you look objectively, I have no problem with the message being put out there in multiple spaces. I'm not saying it would be effective. I'm not saying it would
might
be
be.
right.
But we're talking about a chicken shop.
Yeah, I know.
I think
But
multiple spaces is vague.
Well, it might be vague, but it's the right way to go about things. Potentially, it's better than, for example, if it was me.
It's the fairer way.
If
to
somebody
go about
if
it.
somebody put that idea to me, I would say, you know what, I'd do it, but I'd want to do it in multiple spaces. So the reason I bring up multiple spaces is because it is a good alternative if you want to push that message out.
I agree.
I'm saying chicken shops would potentially be low in a list of places I would do it. I wouldn't necessarily put it in chicken shops.
Yeah, I agree with
You
that.
could put it in a billboard in the street. It would have more exposure statistically because there are more people out on the street
Agreed.
than on a chicken shop. I have no problem with the message. I have a problem with the message being put in a single space.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's
I
my
agree.
point.
I agree
My
with that.
issue
I agree
is
with that.
it being put in that single space is almost
And I don't think it would be effective, by the way.
in a round the bend. Of course not. First of all, no. Listen, if I am carrying a knife and I go into a chicken shop, I've got no time to read the story of the sister who lost her
what I said.
brother to knife crime. I don't care.
And you know what?
I just want to know if I'm going to get burger sauce on my chips. That's
Yeah.
the truth.
And you know what I compare it to? Cigarettes. I don't
Yeah.
get any of the smoke. I'm
Yeah.
like, to me, it's the same concept. I'm like, you put all of these
Images of rotten
but yet
lungs.
still the
Give
NHS,
me
they're
a
still
lighter.
not. They're still.
Yeah.
You can still get free treatment if you've tarred up your lung from smoking by your own choice. Do you know what I mean? And it's like they want to complain. Oh, no. I'm like, hang on a second. You, with all these advertising and all these rules that you put on cigarettes to warn people of the dangers, people are still choosing to harm themselves. And you actually believe people that actually just want to eat are really,
Okay,
you know what I
change
mean?
that,
Like
change
their
that.
main
It's the
issue is
same
reading
thing as
this
put-
box.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
like to see. I don't think it should have happened, but
I
I'd
still
like to
haven't
see
seen-
how they're gonna quantify this data. And,
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I want to see what their thought processes were.
Yeah.
Like, how are we gonna prove this was effective?
I'm still yet to see the obesity campaign in chicken shops.
Yeah, because there was meant to be something and it
Yeah.
never kick-started.
No,
But
that's
you know,
a different topic because I remember there was an advert about completely like they said obesity and then it kicked off into something where people were getting offended that they were mentioning obesity.
Well, I'm offended by this.
Yeah, I'm offended.
I'm offended.
I'm very offended.
I'm
I'm
offended.
offended on behalf of our black boys that are out there. And the thing is, for anybody else who's got an issue and they're, from a different demographic, different ethnic, stand up and speak. I'm speaking on behalf of the black teenage boy. Do you know what I mean? Who is potentially quite vulnerable, and yet we're always taught to see them as the aggressor. I think
But the theory is okay.
it's offensive,
but-
and I actually blame some of the media. To be honest, I think it is an agent to these perpetual manifestations of toxic masculinity, and the representation of black stereotypes are so rich in there where it would make sense for a middle class white person who's watched a program and seen something about black people, and then opened up the newspaper and seen, all these horrific images of black boys being arrested and all these statistics that include other races, but only having black faces on there, meaning that, well, in their minds, they're like, well, yeah, this is who our target audience is, but like, what is the most polite way of doing it without being too offensive? And I think that there would have been a board of people who would have sat there and said, this is a good idea. I think it's wrong.
But then again,
we're more than hoodies. We're more than gangster ideologies. The portrayal of black people being aggressive or overtly abrasive is tired and lazy. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's kind of what needs to stop in order for us to start changing the picture in itself on a wider perspective.
I agree.
Okay, but looking from, if someone is like you're saying, the board is just full of people that just don't have a clue, basically, is if they're making decisions, all they're looking at is numbers. And then are we already saying that like in South, like, or some, are we ignoring the fact? Is there a problem with young people carrying knives?
Okay, here's where I have the issue, right? Okay, I don't agree with the chicken shop thing, but let's say we're going to run with this. Mm-hmm. The fact you've mentioned this in Morley's and Chicken Cottage. Morley's isn't in East London. How many knife attacks have we had?
In East London. More.
You're forgetting about Sam's Chicken. You're forgetting about Dixie. If you're going to attack chicken shops...
Moses showing his profile. He's
Yo,
his profile
listen,
here of the
I don't even eat meat that much anymore.
PFC.
But, PFC, TFC... KFC.
Well, the TFC is a Turkish.
Oh, sorry,
grocery
TFC.
store.
But some of them do. No,
they don't do
TFC.
chicken.
PFC. No, they do lamb rib, but that's something else. My thing is like, if you're gonna do something, do it right, and that's where I feel like it's more calculated than we think. Because essentially, what they're saying is Morley's and Chicken Cottage. So essentially, you're saying this is a South London thing.
But are they not here in North London chicken shops?
As I said, Morley's is not in North London.
Well, Sam's, isn't it?
Sam's Chicken. That's what I'm saying. So if you want to go on this argument of we're attacking chicken shops, you have to attack them all. And what about Nando's? What about
a chicken shop though?
Listen, do you know how many young people go to Nando's?
So many young people
No,
go
what I'm
to
saying, they don't
Nando's.
give you boxes.
No, but it's
So
not the
many
point.
young people.
That's what I'm saying.
They do boxes.
I think
What do you mean when you get a takeaway?
What I think
You can get it in a...
What I think they're doing is, I think they're probably targeting the box distributor.
Because
Rather
it's
than-
quick and easy,
They're
and
not
it's just...
they're probably saying box distributor. We want to put our message on your thing, and
Yeah,
they
yeah,
distribute
yeah.
to these chicken shops.
They're the
You know what I
government.
mean?
They could do what they want. So there's no... If they wanted to do it
If
with
they
all of
told
these chickens...
Nando's,
But how
if
did
they
Nando's-
told
but how-
Nando's that they need to run this campaign, trust me, Nando's would run this campaign.
You know what I mean?
But
yeah.
That's completely different.
You
though.
know,
I think
there's
Nando's
a,
is
there's a different side to this.
Yeah.
There's a different side to this, which we haven't really touched on.
Go on.
Which is, like I said already, I don't have a problem with the message "Don't carry knives" being put out there, because essentially, if it stops one person carrying a knife,
It saved a
very
life.
different.
it saved a life. But the idea now, is it racist? You know, I would, before I look at the chicken shop space, I would look at who's proposing the idea.
Yeah.
So the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and the Home Secretary, Priti Patel,
Pretty.
they
I like
both
Pretty.
have a good track record, in my opinion, of blatant racism. So in that sense, I'd say the idea is racist because less of the chicken shop thing, that's important and we should talk about it, but the people saying it themselves have a good track record in racism.
Yep.
And that's probably, in my opinion,
Yep.
where we should focus our energies. So, I mean, Boris Johnson said that. He called black people pickaninnies and said black people have watermelon smiles. Said that Muslim women walk around looking like letterboxes.
Watermelon
He said
smile.
colonization
wait,
should
hold on.
return to Africa
Wait, hold on,
this
hold on.
time.
Hold on, hold
No,
on.
hold
Can
on.
we just come
He
back
said-
to wait,
he
real
said-
talk?
he said-
Watermelon smile.
Yeah.
Like, could you be?
I know.
Could you have been?
Yeah.
What's a watermelon smile?
Listen,
It's the old like Sambo. What's the thing? Golly, it's like an image.
Gollywog
Yeah, yeah,
caricature.
Like the minstrel men.
Yeah. It's
Watermelon
linked to
smile.
that. You know what I mean?
He's
And
an
we-
absolute idiot.
and
He
we know
said
that-
he said colonization should return to Africa, and this time when the white man returns, we should be grateful.
so you have to look
When
at
did he
who
say this?
is.
When he got
No, he's had a track
He's
record.
been saying this
No,
from
No,
day-
he's been
from day
he's
dot.
been saying
He's been
he's
on the road.
overprivileged.
recent ones.
You know,
I don't know when.
No, they go way back to his time as
yeah.
a journalist
Oh,
on
yeah.
different journalistic platforms.
Before
But-
when he was actually in a suit.
No, but Priti Patel is the same thing. You know, Priti Patel has she got caught out having multiple discretionary meetings in Israel, which is an apartheid state. So what I'm saying here is that you've got two individuals at the center of this idea who have good foundation in terms of racist ideology. In that sense, I say the idea could well be racist, but I focus less on the space where it is, not because it's important, but because I believe in cutting the head of the snake. And the head of the snake this time has two heads, which is the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister. So in that sense, it is racist, can I just say. But I focus less on the space because, listen, the idea is good.
For me, it's not the space, it's the face. So
I think it's
I am very angry at the fact that certain parents have allowed their children to have their photo taken and to be the face of this campaign, especially being black, because once again, if it's a black face, I don't care if you're wearing a nice jumper and you're smiling and you're saying we're trying to stop knife crime, it still literally cries out this is a black problem.
So
I've got some statistics for you guys. This is why it fucks me off. I just want to keep it 100.
No, because I'm trying to move on to the next topic. Go on.
Okay. So conviction rates for ethnic minorities versus white. There were 505,000 white people arrested versus 65,000 black people that were arrested. Given the fact that the black community make up only 3.5% of the population, that means in every 1,000 black people, 35 were arrested, whereas in every 1,000 white people, only 11 were arrested. Does that make sense when the numbers are higher?
Yeah.
Does this make sense to you? Once again, I said it to you in the last podcast that when it comes to the judiciary, when they're seeing a face that is similar to theirs, they can empathize on a level that is deeper and be less strict. Do you know what I mean? And the guidelines are theirs to make. So actually, like, if we had more people in the judiciary, this is why I keep saying we need more representation in places of power. Because maybe if that was the case, then we could...
someone could actually have some conversation.
Yeah, that someone would advocate on behalf of us. Yeah. Somebody would advocate on behalf of us. It doesn't make sense. Like, based on numbers on domestic violence, this includes these same knife statistics. You are sooner going to be raped by your white dad and killed. Do you know what I mean? Than you are from a black person if you're coming from an area where there's no black people. So you can't focus on the capital where we are the denser population, but then the lower number when it comes to white people in general. So we need to stop making it a black problem. And I don't like the fact that we've got our black faces pinned against this campaign because it just further perpetuates that. And that's what irritates me.
That's true.
Okay, yeah. So we're all in agreement here. The boxes are a no-go.
I'm not in it.
Yeah,
Trash.
All right then.
Trash.
Wings and chips is still banging though. Still.
I'm still gonna eat fish and chips. Yeah, I'm still gonna eat chicken shop. Standard. I had wings yesterday, I think. They were dead wings, by the way, yesterday. Dead wings.
From Boris?
No.
Where?
Was it from around here?
Some restaurant. I can't even remember.
That's why you at a restaurant, bruv. Wings off strictly.
No. But I still base a restaurant. I can base a restaurant based on their wings, like because some restaurants they do the right wings. This restaurant they just made. You could pick between barbecue, salt and pepper wings, or buffalo. And I was like, barbecue wings. Let me get the barbecue. They literally had clearly just cooked plain wings, and then whatever you pick, they just throw a sauce on it because
I think wings need a level of poverty.
They need marination.
I think wings need a level of poverty today.
Yeah,
I like that. That's a good statement.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's
But
like
what
certain
I'm saying
foods
is
that
the wings that I had. No, but if you can cook them well.
Yeah, I'm not saying places.
But those wings were so
do
disappointing.
you want to name and shame this establishment? I'm only joking.
Trying to get the...
But you mentioned Boris, yeah, and I've got another topic on Boris right now.
A waste man.
Yeah. Boris Johnson is basically he's seeking to end the automatic release of prisoners like halfway through their sentence to basically keep dangerous criminals off the street. Now, the debate here is, do you think that in practice is that a good thing going forward in terms of having no incentive for early release for prisoners?
No.
Well, absolutely not. But the prison system needs to reform completely. I truly, truly believe in rehabilitation, and they've taken out funding from rehabilitation out of these systems. So therefore, these people are in a perpetuated continuum, going day in, day out. So I can't even begin to argue about whether he's got the right idea, discontinuing the automatic release, Whereas I would actually say, well, actually, there just needs to be a complete reform in the way that they are treating these prisoners, because you're supposed to be getting people prepared to come back into society. So if
But if a man commits a crime and you sentence him to this, should he not serve his term? But you can rehabilitate him within. But should he not serve his punishment? Why should good behavior? Why should not fighting a guard or just not fighting prisoners or just looking like you're being good allow you to cut your years in half after you've taken a life, for instance?
But that's how it works anyway. You have your sentence and you can be eligible for parole. Depending on the crime, it doesn't mean if they sentence you to 10 years, it doesn't mean you're going to do 10 years.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, should it not be?
Nah,
you sentence.
so.
Like,
well,
you
actually,
done this,
I
10
would,
10 years.
you know, bar the person who's killed someone or whatever. I would sooner rather have somebody back into society, welcomed back with open arms, with the opportunities to be able to work, to be able to put back into the system, than for me, the taxpayer, to just be paying for their meal night in, night out.
So, in my opinion, and this carries on from what you say, this topic, it cuts into a philosophical question, which has dogged man from way back when, which is the criminal justice system about punishment or about rehabilitation? Now, you yourself siphoned off certain crimes.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about like your murders, your rapes, your paedophilia, all those dark crimes. I think if you do some of those dark crimes, you should do your time. You shouldn't be allowed to get away when you do 50% of your time, or to even be considered when we're talking about some of the most disgusting filthy acts out there.
If, especially like, not wishing, like something happened to your family and then that man was sentenced and all he had to do was behave in jail, would you really want him on street?
Yeah.
He wouldn't make it to court.
Exactly.
No, one thing. If he did get to court in this theory and then he was sentenced to a certain amount of years,
so
would you want this man on the street? Because
no, he should absolutely do his time. He should absolutely do his time. But that's not coming from a selfish level. If my son, God forbid, killed someone, you should never see the light of day.
So that flies in the face. That flies in the face of your idea about rehabilitation.
No, it doesn't.
It
because
does.
I'm talking
Yeah,
about
it does, because you said...
No, it doesn't, because I'm talking
don't shut me down.
I'm talking about particular crimes.
He's the chair.
Yeah, he's the chair, but I've got a point. Do you know what I mean? Like, do not never, like, at the end of the day, if we're talking about somebody who's had a misdemeanor, it was a stupid driving offense, the likelihood is, you know, you've put them through a driving course, like what they do, you know, if like in general. But let's say you've actually had to do some time because it was really dangerous. Cool. Do you know what I mean? You then get released and you still pay a fine. I think that's fine. If we're talking about a murderer, stay in jail.
But the thing is, how many?
This is what we're saying. He's basically saying you should do your time. That's it. But if I'm committing a crime, I know, even if it's not murder or something like bad. But if I'm committing a crime and the sentence is this, then I should be due that time.
I agree.
They should sentence me the time. If it's murder and then if I was sentenced to 25 years, then give me 25 years.
It should be 25 years for murder.
Or if I get half, which is I don't know, 12 or 13, whatever, blah blah blah, then give me that then.
I disagree.
But don't say I can just be good and then just let me out, because then what if I'm not rehabilitated? What if it's an act?
Yeah.
Well,
we have to be more nuanced.
Look at James Bulger, for an example.
Right, this is it.
Released.
We have to categorize crimes, exactly. So someone like the Bulger case, we know that is in the extreme part of the spectrum. And I think there, actually, the sort of sentences that those people get needs to be increased. Because you should never... It's a gift, actually, that you're still breathing. And you should be grateful for it.
Agreed. I'm with you.
But in the same vein, there are other crimes which are less bad, which maybe you can say, well, you
can
know,
truly
X,
be
Y, Z.
rehabilitated.
Or shoplifting or...
Right.
Yeah,
so
and
the answer isn't yes, no. The answer is more succinct, more... there's a caveat there, yeah.
Can I say something, though? Because I think... I don't think I disagree with you, but I think I agree with Mansor in the sense of I don't think it can be a one-for-all system.
Absolutely
Because it's
not.
like even murder is very vague.
Circumstantial,
It's very circumstantial. And, you know, speaking from people I know that are in prison, out of prison have come out, there's always two sides to the story. God forbid my son one day grows up and is in a chicken shop eating this knife-free box or whatever. And something pops up. This can happen to people we know. And it's a situation where it's him or them. God forbid he commits murder. I know he's not a bad person, but in that situation, the guy didn't want to die. So this legislation essentially is saying, you ain't coming out. And the reason I'm so against this, because it kind of links to what we were talking about in the last one with Shamia. I do understand on a surface level what they're trying to do. But the problem is, this is how the Tories always work. They use legislation to seem good and whatever, but they use it to kind of sweep everything. There are so many people right now in prison on remand that are in there for just carrying a little bit of weed, which essentially means they don't know how long they're going to be in there.
Exactly,
so what that is saying is Boris Johnson's just like, well, you can stay in there. This is just a man that was caught with a little 8-bag or whatever. And as well as the guy that's maybe raped 10 people, you're essentially saying we are the same.
Totally
I think
right.
there needs to be, as Mansor said, it can't be a one-size-fits-all. Every case is uniquely different.
But then that means you're saying...
So this is what I'm saying.
Do you believe there should be cases where it is, that's your time and that's it?
Yes.
Because we're not a place we're not a place that does a death penalty. It should still be if you've done something so horrific and that we have
for
evidence.
example,
But to answer your question, there are though. There are sentences without the chance of parole. That's what I'm saying. It's not like the way people are saying it, like that doesn't necessarily happen.
Moses is right. But I think how often are those sentences given out? I think they could be given out more for some of the things we've seen.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
You mentioned weed, which is a very good thing. So if you look at Portugal, for example, Portugal have decriminalized a lot of their drug policy. And they actually, as a result, some argue, of doing that, have some of the lowest drug usage in comparison to European averages. It's a good case study, not because the countries are exactly the same, but what I mean is treat different crimes differently. Something like weed, which is what you mentioned, I don't think you need to treat it in the same way, right? But I think there is a subset, murders, rapes, which actually the sentences should be increased, and the type of thing that you're talking about without parole should be increased. It's not fair that when you see something, it's like you see some of this terrible, terrible act, and this person's been murdered, and they were a completely vulnerable person, and you know that criminal is really going to do less. They haven't got the life sentence that they gave to that other person who they killed. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. So in that sense, I agree that there are certain crimes that should be done bad.
Yeah. I agree with you. But I think what we have to be careful of, for me, is people often go to the big ones, the rapes, the murders. And again, I think they're all a lot more nuanced than people like to make out.
True. Yeah,
I'm not saying I think I want murderers or rapists out in the street, but when you actually, for someone that listens to a lot of true crime and podcasts or stories, it's all very nuanced. It's like you can be given the sentence of a rapist, but let's say, for example, you're at a party, we've all been at parties, and I was hearing this story from someone close to me the other day. Somebody linked up with a girl who told them they were a certain age, and then when somebody else found out, things hit the fan and they realised she was underage, right? That person went to prison, served their time. They're not a rapist like a Bulger or whatever. Yes, it's legally rape, and I'm not saying like that's a very whatever you think is the most but that's what I mean. When you put like hard, fast sentencing on just rape, murder, it becomes very dangerous because you stop looking at things for actually what they are and seeing people as humans. You just see it as, you by the book did this, that's what you're getting, and it's never that simple.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
So I want us to all be clear. I'm actually with Mansor, and like from when I started talking, him and I were like nodding because I don't think it's possible for you to be able to just paint the same brush and say, okay, fine, the same conviction should go to this person. Some things may be the exact same act, similar times, but the circumstances would be different. You hear of women who were battered, battered woman syndrome, boiling kettle syndrome, where finally, they've had enough. Their husband has been beating them, raping them, abusing them, and finally, one day she finally kills him, not with the intention to kill him, but with the intention to fight back for once, And she finds herself in a situation where there was a true story about this actually, and a woman was arrested, and the police in charge actually lied and said that she seemed compos mentis when they had arrived on the scene. but actually she wasn't. The young police officer that was there was actually the one who tried to console her and, try and find out if she's okay. But because he needed to have a certain number of arrests on his books for promotion, he said she seemed compos mentis and the crime was big enough, that the case went to court and she was sent to prison. She was there for several years, and it only came through the admission of that young police officer that actually, do you know what? When I did arrive on the scene, she did seem out of it. She wasn't compos mentis at the moment and at that point in time, So it being the case, that woman didn't deserve to do the number of time that she was there for, and therefore the judge was right to actually reduce that time and to say, okay, look, based on the evidence, we're going to give you time served. Do you get what I mean?
I do, yeah.
It's not a one-size-fits-all, absolutely not, because some people's circumstances differ from the other. It's different from somebody who woke up in the morning, didn't have anything to do, and maybe for whatever reason decided, I'm going to start beef, I'm going to start war, and ended up taking a life. You don't need to see the light of day.
And also, I think it's even more insidious than that, because what I actually feel, and maybe this is just the inner Rastaman in me, basically, I feel you see it in America in their justice system. Once you've become a felon or a convict, you can't vote. I feel like there's something more insidious where the Tories or Boris are actually trying to keep people in that maybe are out soon, that clearly against their leadership. I think they're almost trying to...
Wow, Moses talking about machinations here.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? I think there's something in there that I'm like, well, why suddenly go for that? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? The Tories have a track record of, whether you look at the Windrush scandal, all sorts of things,
trash.
Communities that are clearly against you, trying to really keep them out and ostracized and ineffective. Because if you're, I don't know, can you vote in prison? I don't know how it works.
Around here, yeah. I think you can.
Yeah, but you know what I mean?
Sure,
like, I feel there's something more to it than just, let's keep them off our streets. Because, if you're going to keep them in prison, then are you going to review your prison system? You know what I mean? Like, prisons are being righted all the time, bun up all the time, spiced up. Like, it's not good in there either. Do you get me? And I'm talking about for your workers, for local community, for anything. So I'm like, you know what I mean? That's my opinion on it.
No, you're right.
I think it's darker than it looks.
You're right. I mean? And so you're right when you mention the wider issues, because, and this is what I mean when I go back to the Prime Minister. I know it's going to seem like I've got an agenda against him.
That's fine.
That's because I do. But
just to make it clear,
it's
Mr. Johnson, it's a no from me.
Yeah, listen, man, if I ever see you, I'm going to tell you to your face it's a no. But the point is, it's actually counterintuitive, unproductive to say we increase the sentences, which I agree with, for certain crimes. Yeah, absolutely. When you don't actually invest, because as we all know, prisons are not good places, as Moses said, and there are crimes going on in there and riots going on in there, people dropping drugs with drones in and stuff like this. So you can't actually keep people in for longer, which means more money, without investing more and building more prisons, which means hiring more prison staff. So from a policy-based focus, it actually, I don't know how he will do it. It seems like hot air. It's the sort of thing that he can just come out with because he thinks if he calls an election in the autumn, it can get him votes.
No, but you say that, but then he's had some backlash from people saying it's not going to work. You can't do that.
But sorry.
But him saying it alone, because some people are so fickle, they say, yeah, vote for him because he's tough on crime, X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, the Chancellor, the new Chancellor, he has said we're going to give 100 million to increase the sophistication of prisons. So we're talking about metal detectors and stuff like this. Now, look at the making of that. I mean, where does 100 million come from? You have to borrow that money, right? So this man is willing to borrow money, and we were in a surplus almost before his government came into focus, financially. He's willing to borrow money, increase the financial risk, to put forward a policy that can win people over in a election campaign before it's even started. I think we have to question the man here, not the policy.
Or not, because just as you're saying this, you know what this really looks like? It looks like he's trying to usher in the new prison industrial complex model like you have in America, where you can really monetize prison labor on the cheap. And that's what a lot of America is built on. You you target small misdemeanor crimes and put their sentences for like people that sold crack that are in there pretty much for life. Do you get me? And then they're working a job, whether it's like, because you know how much prison, you know how some towns in America don't exist without prisons. They employ from staff to automobiles to fabrics. So a lot of stuff is made by prisons in America. Yeah. So I'm like, Boris Johnson and his link with Trump and his love of the US, I'm like, that's why I'm like, I think it's a bit more insidious. Maybe that's where it's like, this is the beginning. Let's keep him in there. And let's make sure if you do end up in prison, you're staying in there. And then, okay, maybe we're not borrowing money. Maybe we're now using this to monetize prisons.
But then what I'm going to say
generate more money.
Yeah, but what I'm saying in a way, think about, okay, we're talking about prison in a way where I've committed a crime and now I can't get out, so I'm stuck. So what's the point of rehabilitating or anything? What if the sense is, what if that actually does take effect where if you commit a crime, you do it, and rather than actually committing, what if you decide not to commit the crime because you know you have no chance of getting out? So how would his prison labor system work?
I think because
if people don't want to go there because they know they have to do the time.
True, I think there'll be a.
So you're talking about higher.
I'm talking about preventing it in the first place.
I think it will prevent some people, but I think what it will do largely is trap those that are already in. And I think that's potentially where the monetization.
But that's another problem. That's another problem there. No, because in the sense of if you've had your sentence, I don't think it can work like that. Because if you have your sentence and they said that you can get out for good behaviour, but then Boris says that can't happen anymore. Surely there's got to be something in the system that says
I would hope
you can't just change my sentence because a man just says now.
You could say this about the Windrush. You could say this about the Windrush scandal.
Yeah, true.
People that were invited over to this country rebuilt it, and now you're getting dashed out.
Yeah.
Do you get me?
But
You
what
can
I'm
say
saying
this
is,
about
but there's a problem there, though, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
So I'm saying, there'll surely be a fight on their hands to say, wait, hold on, we're taking away your parole now.
I would hope, but
so guys, I've got one kind of angle that I think I always head towards, no matter what, in every argument. When it comes to this type of argument, a lot of people who are going into prison, they are aware of what the repercussions are going to be. They are aware there's a lot more people in prison for consciously making a decision that they felt they had to make at the time. And a lot of people who are making these decisions are disenfranchised individuals who've been let down by the system in the first place. A lot of people who are committing these crimes are underachievers, people who have less education than others, who are not deemed fit as it is by places of work, even though they could potentially do the job just as well as anybody else. So they're actually quite dispelled from society. Gang culture, drug culture, whatever it is, it may have caught them. Do you know what I mean? And they got stuck in that system because that was a means to an end for them. If it's drugs or if it's,
but you're surely giving some people a pass, no?
Different levels of crime. I should hope that some people would get that grace, but then actually the people who do get the grace tend to be people who are coming from wealthier backgrounds, who are believed to have a better life ahead of themselves, so therefore they shouldn't be convicted, whereas a kid who's coming from their states is seen as somebody who's made a stupid decision, but when they're not actually looking at the fact that they were never served a better opportunity from the get-go, and therefore they felt like their options were limited, and therefore crime was one of the main ways to get out of their situation or to feed them, fund them, because not a lot of them do these crimes that would take them out of the hood. It keeps them in the hood.
Now you're in a way, you're targeting a certain demographic for who this could be affecting. I'm talking about
I'm using that particular demographic because a lot of the other demographics, middle class people, have got the money to get the best lawyers to get them out of circumstances. If they have this sentence that says you stay in regardless, then it can't be, okay, we're going to give that demographic, no, you have to stay in, and then that demographic, you have a chance for early release. They'll put it on a level playing field, essentially, wouldn't it not?
Happen.
Okay, so then
ideally, but not in practice.
It's a utopic idea, and it's something that where we come from a system where money talks, and I don't see that changing just as soon, and I don't see a Tory government making that as a decision. And in general, any government should think about the rehabilitation of people before just sentencing them to prison. There's some things to me that just are not offenses. Yes, they're arrestable, but they're not offenses that I feel like they should be in prison. So actually that's taking up space. And once again, I'm sorry, I don't want to pay for somebody who doesn't necessarily need to be in prison, who isn't necessarily a risk to me. I feel like prison should definitely be the end point for people who are high risk, and a lot of those people shouldn't have any opportunities to simply just get a probation hearing and be given a lesser time for what they've gone in for, because those are the crimes, to me, that mean that we do need you away from society.
It's a headline policy unless you actually dedicate the money to the prison system as a whole.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, you can't have everybody in one place shoved in there for longer, and you have the same number of prisons in the country. It just doesn't work.
Yeah,
prisons are already overpopulated.
Yeah.
You trick people into thinking, into electioneering and stuff like that. And if you do carry it out, you actually endanger people because there's not enough prison staff already.
Yeah.
You see some of these prison staff getting rushed already and stuff like that. I mean, look at the disrespect. That's disrespect, isn't it? I mean, now we're becoming like one of those South American countries where prisoners rule over prisoners and the prison staff just turn a blind eye. That's potentially the route you could go down
absolutely.
with this type of policy.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Even though in theory, I think the policy is a good thing, but you need more money for the system as a whole.
For me personally, I think the policy is probably targeting probably preventing rather than the people in there, because I think that's definitely a deterrent. Like I've committed my crime. I'm gonna be in there. I better not, because I ain't got no chance of saying, "Oh, good behaviour, let me out." I'm in there now, so I got to do life. If I do life, I'm doing life.
I think it's more evil than that. I think there's definitely a lot of
I think
conspiracy theory.
No, honestly,
Yeah.
I think
it's more.
I think
evil.
you're onto something, and
Yeah,
actually,
Machinations,
Boris
Moses.
is
Boris
is definitely somebody who is
Wasteman.
sensationalized by the idea of the American justice system, and I think on a worldwide perspective, there's been so many cases that have ended up in the United Nations because of the way in which America are extreme with their sentencing. I feel like America's style of sentencing, especially ethnic minorities, just is a continuum of it's a modern format of the slavery that they had before, because like I'm saying, just like here, anyway, I think this formula meets anyway. People who are disenfranchised, people without any other options, who are pinned to a specific lifestyle, who then commit a certain crime, then over convicted for that crime, they are in there for a longer period of time. You monetize. You're definitely onto something, Moses. Do you know what I mean? You monetize, because even workers who just came out. One person I know just came out of prison. And they were actually working in there. Do you know what I mean? And paying taxes, etc. Do you know what I mean? Like, so there are ways of making money from
Definitely.
They do that in other countries
from
as well.
inmates.
Yeah. Like if you go to China or North Korea and stuff,
On a positive note,
common practice.
On a positive note, I did an event with a charity called The Clink. And what they do is provide education for people in prison.
Is that Clink with a K?
Clink with a C.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they train them up as chefs, So obviously these are lower risk. I did an event for them, if you remember. They're lower risk inmates, of course. Because you're dealing with knives, etc., etc. But they're in there for crimes where, if they come out and they don't have means to work, then actually the reality is they're going to go back out there, probably be a few weeks in their neighborhood, reoffend, and end up in there with a longer sentence. They already don't have an education, so they don't have something to lean on. So I, for one, am going out there and advocating for them and just speaking on their behalf to as many head chefs that I can, to give them an opportunity that when they come out, they can get work, so that they're not sidetracked by the only limited opportunities that they've got, And I think these are the sorts of formats that I'm talking about when it comes to rehabilitation, bringing people back and getting them into the swing of society, rather than having people who either going to end up on the dole or end up back in crime and back in prison.
It's very good, I think, rehabilitation, but I often question it for certain criminals.
Absolutely. So I just spoke about low risk.
Yeah.
I think in my mind, I'm like, get as many people who are low risk out of prison and into work. Out of prison and into work. And then what we now need to start doing is creating a sort of strata, but then not one that means it's one for all, but a guideline that gets you to see, okay, fine, this certain level of crime, pedophilia, you won't see the light of day. This level of crime, because pedophilia, I'm sorry, you're touching children, right? You're doing things to children. Like, for me, you can't get out. But like what Moses is saying, you're in a situation where you'd have never, it's wrong place, wrong time. You responded, for example, to a situation that was ahead of you. Let's just say his kid at the time was wearing a hood and a white police officer has arrived. You're just going to look like another Mandan person. This is not a Mandan person.
But linking this back to Andrew's point then, like something like pedophilia.
But then but what I'm saying is, you see that kid? That Moses was talking about?
Yeah.
He defended himself and someone lost their life. Should he be in there forever? No, it's not the same thing.
Even that's maybe taking it.
I know. I'm with you, but that's not today's podcast.
You don't just say even pedophilia. Wait, and then you got to finish.
I think maybe this is maybe just me and the way I think, and it might sound utopic, but I think you have to, for me, in this life, you have to believe people have the propensity to change, no matter how dark they are. Because I don't think, I'll tell you why, I don't think monsters are born. I think monsters are created. So, as sad as it sounds, I have to be fair.
I don't know.
I have to be fair. For me, this is just me. I'm not saying anyone else has to believe it.
Some people miss that feeling of empathy.
But even that is like, that's a psychological thing, which they didn't make a choice to do. They didn't ask to be born. They didn't ask to be born with the brain that, and it's like us as a society.
And they didn't ask to be attracted to children.
Hang on, let me finish. Let me finish. Let me finish my point.
Please finish on a strong point, Moses.
Let's wrap up.
Yeah, that's why I was like, I didn't necessarily even want it to go here.
Yeah, all right.
But all I'm saying is like, even in a lot of situations, again, somebody that's into true crime and listens to a lot of interviews from people that have done various crimes, you realise the vast majority of those that have committed sex offences were also victims of sex offences. So then it does get into a very philosophical debate. It's like, do we really want to cast this net on everyone and not understand the individuals as opposed to just the crime? That's all I'm saying. And I get why people are like, no, but I have to be fair with my
by all means, give them treatment, give them whatever. Don't put them on my streets. It's just as simple as that.
Yeah, but I'm not saying you should.
Yeah,
but like, have you not seen what they do in LA and various parts of America? They have zones where they can only live and they can only leave. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying you should go put him next to Musa. I'm saying,
I was going to say,
I don't believe they even should not ever see the light of day. That's all.
Okay, so you're at the belief that maybe, to summarize, you're at the belief that this early release thing should happen for potentially low risk criminals, essentially still. But then there should still be crimes where it's like you stay and you enjoy your time in jail.
Yes. More so than already is the case.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think we'll make a good time. But did you want to touch on China? I know you want to touch on China. You're itching for this, man. So
do you know what? Yeah.
I'm going to let you lead this one.
So I was on Twitter the other day, and I saw a video of this woman, and she was basically crying about how about the protests in Hong Kong, and about how there was good and bad on both sides, and the protesters and the police should be working together to fix things, because if she wanted to live in a society like that, she could have just gone back to South Africa. I thought this was a funny, not funny in like a ha-ha way, but I thought this was something to touch on. It depends on what angle you want to touch on it. Do you want to touch on it from the idea of white entitlement, or do you want to touch on it from a more foreign policy angle? That's open to the table right now.
I like foreign policy, but that's me. Because I think the white entitlement is just clear to see.
Okay.
And if it's not clear, I don't need to be educated.
We're going foreign policy.
Personally. That's just me opinion.
Gang, we're going foreign policy. Yeah? So, China are nuts, man. China are nuts.
Chef Mo loves China.
Listen, China are nuts. Listen, China are nuts, yeah, because...
What, China?
I don't know.
They're nuts. They're nuts.
Is that the name of the
They're
sponsor?
clearly, you know what? I'm fully supportive of the Hong Kong people, right? Democracy is a relative concept. It's a concept open for questioning, but they have a way of being that they're used to. And, you know, I think when a city has its own place on the stock exchange, you have to treat that city with respect. China don't treat it with respect. They're going in there now and they're trying to stop these protesters and stuff. So I'm very pro the Hong Kong protests.
Wait, why China a democracy though?
No, Hong Kong though.
yeah.
Hong Kong has a different system which is more in line with the
business,
British system.
They're like they're a corporation, isn't it?
Yeah,
Well,
and
Hong Kong.
See, that's why they say he's chairman of Hong Kong. Is it chairman or CEO? Or,
I think it's
Well,
CEO.
Hong Kong.
yeah.
Yeah,
No prime
they're-
minister or king is CEO of
They
Hong
have a
Kong.
place
So
on
who
the stock
lives there?
exchange.
So the people that live there, what they're workers.
I mean, I guess you can see it like that.
A lot of them move to mainland China maybe to work, but Hong Kong in itself has a lot of business there. Before these protests, it was in quite a ripe financial state. Obviously, the longer these protests carry on, the more that dwindles. But it's a poor thing, and I think, you know, it's actually a stain on this country because they gave Hong Kong to China as part of that agreement, and they didn't leave the right assurances there in place, and essentially left it susceptible to this sort of thing because China's a completely different system. It's a one-country communist system. It's not a good thing.
So essentially, you're saying it's England top.
I think Britain has a lot to play in this. Yeah. But China are nuts as well, man.
Oh yeah.
For China nuts.
Yeah, they're nuts. They're nuts. But I think they're scared of going in, you know, because they know that this is a stain on them in terms of international stage.
Is this whole situation also the reason why this brutality is going on over there right now?
Yeah. So this originally emanated from this extradition bill, which came about as a result of something earlier on in the year. But now it's just spiraled into anti-China protests. And you've got pro and anti-China groups, by the way, in Hong Kong, and they're both protesting against each other. Yeah, so this South African lady, she was just crying about things, man. She just said, you know...
Amanda.
You can't kiss your teeth like that, man. She was crying. Don't you have any sympathy?
Don't mind her.
You don't have any sympathy for her?
No, none.
Why not?
Listen,
She
white
was
South
upset.
Africans.
Did you see the video?
Yeah,
But she wasn't gonna get out.
such a troll. She was upset. Did you not see the?
Did you see the video?
I've seen the video.
She was upset.
No sympathy. She was upset.
I think she wants to leave China.
Yeah, leave them.
Listen,
Bye.
Hong Kong, you mean?
but you know what?
Hong Kong.
You know what was funny? Yeah,
It's
I
just-
thought it was funny that
I
under
just-
her logic,
Yeah.
the she was saying that the protesters and the police should work together to. It's like saying
It's cute.
It's like saying that the black population in South Africa should have been with the apartheid people to tackle apartheid.
Yeah,
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
The caucasity of it all is nuts.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
White lightning.
Yeah, why not, man?
White lightning. So
But-
the thing is, yeah, it is what it is. What I did find interesting though, guys, China is really big on their technology. And actually, not too long ago, they introduced facial recognition for a lot of their citizens. So actually, what you'll find is that during those protests, what you would have found is that there were shining green laser beams. It was, number one, to disorientate the police, but
Like
also
MIB.
it was also a way of they were flashing them into the cameras so that they couldn't recognize their facial features.
Because you know, like I had a friend that's just come back from a tour in China, and I was asking her how was it, and she was like, "Man, like, because you know that human score thing is legit. Do you know what I'm talking about? So the citizen score, sorry, it's like so basically, you know, like how we have credit ratings here, and like if you have bad credit, it might affect you in trying to buy a house or whatever. But they have that for as a citizen, you get a rating. And basically, the higher your rating, you get access to more parts of. You can live in this place. You can go to
No,
this
but can
restaurant.
you walk? You can go to restaurants with certain
It affects
points.
everything. So, like, and if you have a bad score, you can't go and live. You can't really even go to certain areas because everything's done.
That is nuts.
Like
Shouldn't
she
laugh
was
at
saying,
No, but that is no, but it's nuts because you know why? I see this.
Black Mirror.
I see this future world where, like, say if like they actually like I go to a restaurant and they scan me and go, "Oh, you only got 100 points." And it's like, "Oh, walk away." It's like, fam,
it's real.
Yeah,
But you
yeah,
know
yeah,
where it gets
yeah.
even darker. You know where it gets even darker, which is like I laugh, but it's not funny. You know the way you improve your score.
no.
You snitch on somebody doing something that should have their score lowered.
You're
That's gangster, bro.
That's how you get more points.
That's how you raise your status.
So if my neighbors,
like,
if my neighbors got the water running in there, like on the, and I'm like, yo,
And there's a water ban.
Yeah,
You're
there's a
like,
water
hey,
ban.
we've
I'm
got
like,
a
yo,
water ban.
he's like, good, 10 points.
yeah.
So would you do it? Would you do it?
Bro, I just wouldn't
No,
live
but
in China.
so you have to live. So you have to learn to snitch. You have to be a snitch.
Yeah.
Okay, so now, we ain't got a lot of time. But I need to know. Okay, based on our where we come from and the no snitching policy. If you went to China and your score was low, would you become a snitch because everyone else around you is a snitch?
Listen, dog eat dog.
So
That's
you
all
would
I'm saying.
snitch.
No, I hear you. If I was living in
Mansor's a
China,
snitch.
it's survival though.
Mansor's
It's
a
survival.
snitch.
It's a different thing.
Listen, anybody has
No,
a
but
problem
so
with me
you
being a
snitch.
snitch coming
If
from
I
me,
lived in China and I had to abide by that system, and let's be real, I'm black. So
No, so you're looking up, but basically you're
I'd
walking.
probably be a
You're
criminal,
walking
you know.
street, bare twisted neck, looking for people like.
No, I'm not looking for
And you're
it.
gonna be like, yes, Mr. Officer, he's
No,
over
I'm
there.
not looking for it.
I'm just saying, listen, it's dog
I
eat
would likely
dog.
be a snitch, you know that.
It is.
I'd
get your
actually
score
probably
back.
no, not snitch. Sorry, I'll probably live my life as a criminal.
So do you
Like,
start on a default score? If you
because
go
here's
over
the
there?
thing:
I'm
if
not getting
that's-
that default
If that's
score.
the kind of
As
if that's
a-
the kind of scoring system, like I'd just have to be a black market person. To get what I mean in everything.
No, but as
Yeah,
a
but
kid-
hang on though.
as
You
a
have to
kid-
forget.
Because
no, but you have
because
to
the thing is,
remember-
how many points do you get for snitching? Like if it's a few,
Angela, you have
do
to
you know what I mean? How
remember
many people do you have to snitch on just to make
Angela,
it on an
you have to
even
remember
playing
this
I'll,
is
field?
China.
I'll ratchet up
You
the
have,
scores.
to, you have to remember, this is China. This is the
Yeah.
most
Okay.
surveilled state.
I'm getting in there.
Okay,
I'm getting
but
in
you
there
get
with the
in.
Communist Party and all the man.
No,
Okay,
would you snitch
so
on
guys-
would you snitch on
so
your
guys-
boys if your boys was doing stuff that you could get points for?
Nah, I wouldn't.
Nah, not my boy.
No, that's saying.
I wouldn't.
Hey guys, so don't mind the white South African lady.
She was upset though.
Yeah, she was really upset. Don't mind her. So, like, what I was saying about China's
minutes.
technology, I really just wanted to hear what you guys' perspective is, because while you had the protesters that were coming in with their own technology, trying to waiver some of their, like, to contravene some of their, like, rules, the government decided, well, actually, because of the things that are happening, because of the friction that's happening between the protesters and the police, the government actually shut down and created a firewall in China that they had no access to the internet. What are your thoughts? Is that, what does that say to you about the people of China? And
They're prisoners.
yeah,
Like literally, the fact that you can cut off the internet, that you're cutting off any connection to anybody. Really,
That's
Like,
what the Hong Kong people don't want that sort of life. That's what they're trying to avoid actively. And Europe has a big phobia of Chinese technology. We've seen that with the Huawei ban.
and also the 5G. Yeah, but no.
I don't agree with that, by the way.
isn't
But
there-
what I'm saying is there's a
but what I'm
phobia
saying
there.
is, isn't there kind of like you don't know what they're gonna do with your data essentially? That's the fear, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
even
yeah.
with when everyone was using that face swap app, that Russian one.
Oh yeah.
Did you use it?
Nah.
Yeah, like
Sheep.
I don't want to use. And everyone's using that thing to be like, okay,
I don't know. I'm a
Why
bit
am I
more
giving
woke
them my
with
face?
technology? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's a funny one because one, I have nothing to hide, but two, it's principle.
Yeah,
So
it's-
I toe the
yeah.
line, but I am very aware of what technology is being developed. And
no, but I don't think it's nothing but to hide. I think it's just like they can make a data you,
yeah,
virtually a virtual you.
but they could
for
do that
whatever thing
without
they
the
can do.
face swap app.
do you
No,
see?
but why am I giving them more?
Yeah,
Why
I'm
am I
not going to
giving
give
them
it
my
to
bone
them freely.
structure?
Yeah.
Why am I giving- Like, they don't need to have all of that.
Strong jawline.
They don't need to
Yeah.
make a full me
For a few
out of
likes on
3D
social
printer.
media, it's
Yeah,
not worth it.
Out of 3D
with
printer,
things
no,
with things like the firewall being put up and banning the internet and protesters using their own technology, do we see that if we were to go into a World War III, it is about to be on a different level?
Modern warfare has totally changed. The fact that now American soldiers can sit in a big dark room and control drones is totally different from the 80s. And now we're entering a new phase with this sort of thing. So it will be completely nuts. Cyber warfare is where it's at.
But this is
Where
why.
is that?
This is why.
They're gonna 3D print all our faces and make us
could-
They could do anything. Yeah.
Fine, that's all good. with me.
And the Russians as well. They're
One
at
army of
cyber
Moses
warfare.
is out the front
That's
line.
fine. That's all good because you know why? There's only one Moses, right? There's only one.
these ones can play drums too, fam.
Nah. This is what I love about my job because there are vocations in various fields like Mandala to chef. I'm a musician. I think I'm not saying like you shouldn't engage with technology, but I feel like we've gotten a bit. It happens throughout
We become
civilization.
too reliant.
You look at all the age of civilizations, we get too high for our boots, and then we get slapped up and go back to ground
Like
zero.
Icarus.
All of
You
them.
like the story of
Icarus,
Icarus?
Babylon, the Egyptians. Like, you can go through it. Like, I'm not saying you shouldn't try and get advanced, but I think the issue becomes when you get advanced, you forget about nature and the creator. That is my issue.
Amen.
So that's why
Yes.
I'm always like, learn to cook, learn to plant your plants,
Man,
learn to
Moses.
understand how to distill water, learn how to do this. No, for real,
Come on,
because
yes.
learn to
Don't
move
shout
with
him out
nature.
with
Because
this.
when
Yes,
this thing
yes,
hits and I manage to bush, we're gonna be all right, you know.
We are
And you're gonna
fine.
come to me because you want to hear some music that's gonna lift your spirit.
That was a
I'm gonna
shout
let
out to
them
me.
find their. I'll let them fight their cyber war with clones of me, because when Mansor comes, it's like, is this Moses? I'll play him a drum beat. That's Moses. Them lot can't do that. Do you get me? There's no way you can steal that consciousness from me.
Hey,
Do you get me? There's no
You
way
can't
you
steal
can
creative
steal
consciousness.
Mandala's rest. Like when Mandala makes Sansa or whatever he made for us today, there's no way you can steal that. I've been reading this book. There's this one hotel. I think it's in Hong Kong actually. There's this one hotel in Hong Kong where there's only one like crew of staff, and their only job is to make the bed. Because what they've worked out, no matter how advanced they've got with technology and robots, everything else is robots. Check-in, valet, everything is robots. But they've realized there are just certain things human beings can do that no robot can ever replicate to. And I'm not trying to say real robots can't do a lot, but I think like we need to come back every now and again and realize what actually is important.
Well, that's
Do
the
you
thing.
get me?
The whole thing. Like my job is to do with automation as well. And,
Yeah.
But even someone, there's always that manual checking.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
have to. There's always that manual
There's
checking.
always a
Robots
manual.
can do something, but you
Yeah.
need someone to maintain the robots. Someone
Trust
can
me.
look after the robots. Someone to check that the robots work.
That leaves a big subset of the population out of a job.
That's
Because not
fine.
everybody has that skill.
Yeah, I
That's
know.
fine.
have you guys been to
That's why you
Tesco's
have to-
lately?
That's fine. No,
That's
but you
why
know
you
what I
have-
think
Like,
that's
have
fine.
you actually been to Tesco's lately? It's
But you know what I know? That's
Yeah.
fine. This is why I
They
don't-
scan it when the machine goes wrong.
But I think this is good.
Oh man!
you know, you have to be
no,
like,
no.
excuse me, I need assistance
Yeah, that's
because
what
your
it is.
machine.
Honestly,
Yeah,
guys,
it says
it's
it's
doing too
and they
much.
get the card.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
honestly,
but-
guys, I know this sounds utopic, but I think that's great because I think for a long time we've been peddled and we've created a lot of jobs we actually really think are important when they're not. Do you get me? Because at the core of it, everybody needs the three same things: a roof over their head, some food in their belly, and something to raise their consciousness. From there, you build a civilization, right? And once you've taken care of those three things, I think I'm not trying to, I'm never going to name jobs, but I'm just like, there are a lot of jobs that are going to disappear, but people will be all right. You know why? Because little Timmy in Isleworth will realize, actually, when I really, 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 really deep it, I only did that job to put food in my belly. What do I actually want to do? And that can benefit us as a community. And I know that sounds utopic, but I think it's important. And I think when things do crash and burn, people always come to that. That's why the arts are there. They're there to lift man from Dumfries that's worked in a mine to feed his family, to make him forget about everyday life, for someone to read a book and elevate their just level of understanding, for someone to look at a piece of art. And it doesn't mean you have to be creative. Like, there's always something for someone to admire a structure that you've made and think about mechanics and physics and blah, blah, blah. For someone to see how you've worked out the change and made a form. There's always things that we need that are very simple, but we just run too far with these algorithms. So let them have their war. You get me? I'm gonna be in bush somewhere, like enjoying life. You get me?
All right. I think that's a good place to end it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just made it. You made it on time. You made it on time. That was another episode on Chatting Saltfish. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you.
Mansor,
You're
Moses,
welcome.
Mandala,
Yeah, thank you.
3Ms,
Yes.
Triple M Burger, Morley's.
Hashtag
Yeah,
life free.
don't stop killing our black kids.
That's not an episode of
Our
Chatting
black
Saltfish.
babies deserves better.
You can find us on Twitter and Instagram on Chatting Saltfish, and you know where to listen to us on iTunes, YouTube, and SoundCloud. Until next time, peace.